April 29, 1992. Los Angeles is on fire. 4 police officers have just been acquitted in the brutal beating of Rodney King, despite crystal-clear video footage showing them pummeling an unarmed black man on the side of a highway. Within hours, South Central Los Angeles erupts. 6 days of chaos follow. 63 people dead, over 2,300 injured, nearly $1 billion in damage. A young filmmaker named Matthew McDaniel stands outside the First AME Church in South Los Angeles with his video camera, capturing the raw anger. A man hoists a toddler onto his shoulders and shouts into McDaniel's lens, "If I have to die today for this little African right here to have a future, I'm a dead motherfucker." McDaniel doesn't know it yet, but this footage will become part of one of the most important hip-hop albums ever made. 70 miles north, in a makeshift studio, a 27-year-old producer named Andre Young, known to the world as Dr. Dre, is watching his city burn on television while crafting beats that will change music forever. He's broke. He's angry. He's just escaped from one of hip-hop's most successful groups over a contract dispute that involved alleged threats with baseball bats. He has no money, no label, and everyone thinks his career is over. 7 months later, on December 15, 1992, Dr. Dre releases The Chronic. The album peaks at number 3 on the Billboard 200, sells over 5 million copies, wins a Grammy, makes Dre one of the top-selling American artists of 1993, launches the career of a skinny Long Beach kid named Snoop Dogg, establishes Death Row Records as the most powerful and dangerous label in hip-hop, and permanently shifts the center of the rap universe from New York to Los Angeles. But the story of The Chronic isn't just about music. It's about a city's rage finding its voice, about a desperate escape from exploitation, about a sound so smooth it made violence palatable to suburban America, and about deals with devil-may-care figures that would eventually destroy everything they built. Welcome to the Sound Vault. Every album has a story. This is the story of how Dr. Dre invented G-Funk while Los Angeles burned. To understand The Chronic, you first have to understand what Dr. Dre was running from. Late 1991, N.W.A, Niggas with Attitudes, is one of the biggest groups in hip-hop history. Their 1988 album Straight Outta Compton sold millions and put gangsta rap on the map. Dr. Dre, as producer and occasional rapper, created the sonic blueprint that made N.W.A legendary. But behind the scenes, the group is fracturing. Ice Cube had already left in 1989, claiming manager Jerry Heller and Eazy-E were cheating the group financially. Now Dre is having the same realization. As Dre later told Vibe magazine, "I was getting like 2 points for my production on albums. I still have the contracts framed. I'm not no egotistical person. I just want what I'm supposed to get. Not a penny more, not a penny less." 2 points. Dre had produced 7 albums for Ruthless Records that went platinum. He was the sonic architect of one of music's most profitable movements, and he was earning 2%. Enter Marion Suge Knight. Knight was a former NFL defensive lineman turned music business enforcer. Standing 6'4" and weighing over 300 pounds, he had deep ties to the Bloods gang and a reputation for getting what he wanted by any means necessary. Knight met Dre and told him something nobody else had. "You're being robbed." The DOC, one of Dre's closest collaborators whose promising career was derailed after a car accident destroyed his vocal cords, advised Dre to leave. Knight offered to help extract him from his Ruthless Records contract. What happened next depends on who you ask. According to Eazy-E, Knight and 2 associates showed up at a meeting armed with baseball bats and metal pipes. They allegedly threatened Eazy-E and Jerry Heller until Eazy signed papers releasing Dre, the DOC, and singer Michel'le from their contracts. Knight has always denied using violence. He claims it was purely business negotiation. Either way, by April 1991, Dr. Dre was free. Dre reflected on the split years later. "I got Ice Cube his start. I also launched Eazy. There ain't no question that N.W.A became what it was in large part because of my music and my producing. Me and Eazy had agreed from Jump Street that we was to be partners. Now Eazy says he's the owner of the record company, Ruthless. Well, let him own it then. But I was never supposed to be signed to him or owned by him." Eazy-E immediately filed lawsuits against Dre for racketeering and conspiracy. The legal battle would drag on for years, but Dre had bigger problems. He was broke. As he told Rolling Stone in 1993, "I needed a record to come out. I was broke. I didn't receive one fucking quarter in the year of 92. Because Ruthless spent the year trying to figure out ways not to pay me so that I'd come back on my hands and knees. If I had to go back home living with my mom, that wasn't going to happen." With Dre's exit secured, Suge Knight moved to establish a new label. The original name was Future Shock, but both the DOC and a drug kingpin named Michael Harry O. Harris, who was serving time for drug trafficking and attempted murder, suggested variations on Death Row, a play on Def Jam Records. Problem: another producer, Unknown DJ, owned the rights to Death Row. After negotiations, Unknown DJ sold the naming rights to Dre and Knight in July 1991. By 1992, the name had evolved to Death Row Records. Harry O, operating from prison through his attorney David Kenner, provided initial funding through his company Godfather Entertainment. Knight became CEO. Dre became the label's artistic cornerstone, but Death Row had no distribution, no major label backing, and Dre hadn't released solo material in years. They needed a hit to prove the label was viable. In early 1992, Knight arranged for Death Row to contribute to the soundtrack of the Lawrence Fishburne film Deep Cover. Dre produced the title track and recruited a young rapper he'd recently met through his stepbrother Warren G. The rapper's name was Calvin Broadus. The world would know him as Snoop Dogg. Warren G had been shopping demo tapes of his group 213, which included Warren, Snoop, and singer N.W.A, around Los Angeles. One tape featured Snoop rapping over the en vogue hit Hold On. Dre flipped when he heard it. "When he finally got a chance to hear me, I was ready," Snoop recalled years later. The Deep Cover single dropped in April 1992. It was dark, menacing, and unlike anything else on the radio. The hook, "It's 187 on an undercover cop," referenced California Penal Code for murder and immediately drew controversy. But it also drew attention. The single became a minor hit, and industry insiders took notice. Dr. Dre was back, and he had found a star. April 29, 1992. The day Deep Cover is climbing the charts, Los Angeles explodes. The 4 officers who beat Rodney King are acquitted. Video footage had shown them striking King 56 times with batons while he lay on the ground. The jury, with no black members, found 3 officers not guilty on all charges. They couldn't reach a verdict on one charge against the 4th officer. The verdict is announced at 3:15 p.m. By 5:30 p.m., South Central Los Angeles is in chaos. Dre and his crew are recording at Solar Studios in Hollywood when the riots break out. Matthew McDaniel, the K-Day intern with his video camera, captures the immediate aftermath outside the First AME church. One furious protester yells directly into his lens, "Damn it, you need to step your punk ass to the side and let us brothers and us Africans step in and start putting some foot in that ass." McDaniel films for hours, documenting rage that had been building for generations. For 6 days, Los Angeles burns. The California National Guard, Army, and Marines are deployed. By the time order is restored, 63 people are dead, over 2,300 injured, and nearly $1 billion in property has been destroyed. Snoop Dogg later admitted to participating in the looting. "I went out looting and stole all kinds of shit and brought it all back to the studio." Dre was watching it all, the anger, the fires, the justified fury at a system that brutalized black people with impunity, and channeling it into music. N.W.A had warned about police brutality 5 years earlier with "Fuck the Police." Now, with Los Angeles in ashes, Dre's prophecy had come true. A month after the riots, McDaniel contacted Dre's camp. He had 12 minutes of powerful footage. Could they use it? Dre said yes. That footage would become the opening of 2 tracks on The Chronic, Lil Ghetto Boy and The Day the Niggas Took Over. June 1992. With Deep Cover creating buzz, Dre begins recording what would become The Chronic. But he needs a team. He calls on veteran West Coast DJ Chris "The Glove" Taylor, who had appeared in the breakdancing film Breakin' alongside Ice-T. The Glove had serious credentials as a mixer and would become crucial to The Chronic's sound, though his contributions would later become a source of bitter dispute. Most importantly, Dre recruits multi-instrumentalist Colin Wolfe, a bass player and keyboardist from Baldwin Hills. Wolfe had worked with George Clinton and understood the Parliament-Funkadelic sound that Dre wanted to emulate. At the same time, Dre and I were like, "We need to do some P-Funk sounding shit," Wolfe told Wax Poetics in 2014. "We wanted to make a real Parliament-Funkadelic sound." Then Dre assembles what he calls the Death Row Inmates, a crew of mostly unknown rappers and singers. Snoop Dogg, the 20-year-old Long Beach MC who would become the album's breakout star Daz Dillinger, and Kurupt, cousins who would form Tha Dog Pound RBX. Snoop's cousin, known for his rapid-fire delivery, Warren G., Dre's stepbrother, part of the 213 crew. N.W.A, the melodic singer from 213 with a voice like butter over gravel. Lady of Rage. A fierce female MC Dre flew in from New York Jewel, the R&B vocalist dubbed First Lady of Death Row. The DOC. Dre's longtime writing partner, whose raspy voice, damaged in the car accident, appears in skits. Recording takes place primarily at Solar Studios and at Death Row's own makeshift facilities. The sessions are loose, collaborative, heavy with weed smoke. Dre has a specific sonic vision. Smooth, melodic, heavy on the low end, built around funk samples but augmented with live instrumentation. He wants music that sounds laid back even when the lyrics are hardcore. The sound already has a name. Cold 187 of Above the Law had pioneered G-Funk years earlier, but Dre is about to perfect it and bring it to the masses. Colin Wolfe explains the division of labor. For the most part, it was me and Dre who would build the tracks. Suge would occasionally come in with some lyrics and that D's Newts skit, but as far as the tracks, not that much input at all. Daz was slowly trying to get into the creative mix. He was starting to come in there with ideas, towards the latter half of the record. Daz did do the drums on Rat-Tat-Tat-Tat, but for the most part it was me and Dre. But one person dominates the recording more than anyone, Snoop Dogg. Snoop later marveled at his own ubiquity. When I listen back to the Chronic album, I'm like, how the fuck was I on damn near every song? I was whooping niggas. They would be going home to go get chicken, I'd be in that motherfucker all night. If Dre even had half of a beat or had the drums, I'd write some shit to the drums and come up with a melody. Before you know it, I'm on a song. The DOC, whose writing skills remained sharp even after his voice was damaged, contributed crucial hooks and verses. He wrote the chorus to Nothing But a G-Thang, the song that would define an era. Summer 1992. Dre has an album taking shape, but Death Row still has no major distribution. Originally, Sony was supposed to release The Chronic, but Sony executives got cold feet. As one source put it, Sony passed due to the crazy things going on around Death Row and Dre's complicated contractual status with Ruthless Records. Enter Jimmy Iovine. Iovine was a legendary record executive who'd engineered Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run, produced albums for U2, Tom Petty, and Stevie Nicks, and co-founded Interscope Records with Ted Field in 1990. John McClane, an A&R executive at Interscope, heard Dre was working on new material. He reached out. Iovine listened to early versions of The Chronic and immediately understood what he was hearing, the future of hip-hop, but there was a complication. Priority Records, which distributed Ruthless Records, still had claims on Dre's work from his N.W.A days. So Iovine negotiated a complex three-way deal. Interscope would put up $10 million to finance and distribute Death Row Records. Priority would handle some distribution aspects, and Death Row would maintain creative control. The deal closed in 1992. Death Row now had major label backing and a release date for The Chronic, December 15, 1992. November 19, 1992. Before the full album drops, Interscope releases the first single, Nothing But a G-Thang. The song is immediately different from anything else in hip-hop. Built around a sample of Leon Haywood's I Want to Do Something Freaky to You, augmented with keyboards played by Dre himself, the track is smooth, melodic, hypnotic. The opening bars, 1, 2, 3, and to the 4, Snoop Doggy Dogg and Dr. Dre is at the door, become instantly iconic. The video shot in Compton shows Dre and Snoop cruising through a backyard BBQ. There's a guy grilling with a 9mm tucked in his waistband. Warren G brazenly rolls a blunt on camera. A fridge full of 40-ounce malt liquors. It's a Saturday in South Central, and it's simultaneously threatening and inviting. The song climbs to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. It stays on the charts for months. AllMusic later calls it the archetypal G-Funk single. More importantly, Snoop Dogg becomes an overnight sensation. His flow is lazy, confident, almost conversational, but technically flawless. He sounds dangerous and charming at the same time. As one critic notes, Snoop's flow was laconic and relaxed, massively confident and capable of rapid-fire tongue twisters, but coolly laid back and almost effortless. December 15, 1992. The Chronic hits stores. The album cover is a homage to zigzag rolling papers, the kind used to roll marijuana joints. The title itself is slang for high-grade cannabis. Dre is making no apologies for what this album represents. From the opening track, the album is aggressive and unapologetic. Snoop and RBX send threats to anyone who opposes Death Row. They mock Eazy-E and Jerry Heller. But it's the production that sets the album apart. Dre welds together Parliament-Funkadelic samples, live bass from Colin Wolfe, synthesizers, and Minimoog keyboards to create a sound that's simultaneously hard and smooth. The tempo is slower than East Coast rap. The bass is heavy. Female vocals float through multiple tracks. Everything sounds expensive, professional, cinematic. Critics immediately recognize something special is happening. Rolling Stone's Havelock Nelson writes that the album drops raw realism and pays tribute to hip-hop virtuosity. Nothing But a G-Thang is already dominating radio. The second single, Fuck With Dre Day, and Everybody's Celebrating. A savage diss track aimed at Eazy-E, Luke Campbell of 2 Live Crew, and New York rapper Tim Dog, climbs to number 8. The video for Dre Day features a fake Eazy-E character getting humiliated, pouring gasoline on an already bitter feud. The third single, Let Me Ride, becomes the album's most commercially polished moment. Built around Parliament's mothership connection, Starchild, the track is pure G-funk, smooth, funky, riding that lowrider vibe. The video features Dre cruising South Central in a '64 Chevy Impala with hydraulics bouncing. In February 1994, Let Me Ride wins Dr. Dre his first Grammy Award for Best Rap Solo Performance. By early 1993, The Chronic is everywhere. The album peaks at number 3 on the Billboard 200. It spends 8 months in the top 10, an unprecedented feat for a hardcore rap album. By year's end, it has sold 3 million copies in the United States alone. Worldwide sales eventually exceed 5 million. Dr. Dre becomes one of the top 10 best-selling American performing artists of 1993. But the album's impact goes far beyond sales numbers. The Chronic does something no hardcore rap album had done before. It crosses over to white suburban audiences without compromising its content. The smooth production makes the violent content more palatable. Soccer moms are horrified when they finally pay attention to what their kids are listening to, but by then it's too late. The Chronic is a phenomenon. John Pareles of the New York Times writes, "The bottom register is swampy synthesizer bass lines that openly emulate Parliament-Funkadelic. The upper end is often a lone keyboard line, whistling or blipping incessantly. In between are wide open spaces that hold just a rhythm guitar, sparse keyboard chords. The songs were smoother and simpler than East Coast rap, and decisively expanded the hip-hop audience into the suburbs. The album establishes G-Funk as the dominant sound in hip-hop for the next several years. Every producer starts chasing that laid-back, Parliament-sampled, synthesizer-heavy sound. More importantly, The Chronic shifts the geographic center of hip-hop from New York to Los Angeles. For the next 5 years, West Coast rap, specifically Death Row Records, dominates the genre. The Chronic isn't just Dr. Dre's solo debut. It's a launching pad for an entire generation of West Coast artists. Snoop Dogg is everywhere on the album, and his star power is undeniable. Within a year, he'll release Doggy Style, which debuts at number 1 and sells 800,000 copies in its first week, the biggest opening week in hip-hop history to that point. Daz Dillinger and Corrupt, who formed Tha Dog Pound, will release their own double platinum album Dog Food in 1995. Warren G will score a massive hit with Regulate in 1994. Featuring Nate Dogg, the song becomes one of the decade's defining West Coast anthems. Nate Dogg becomes the go-to hook singer for West Coast rap, appearing on countless hits throughout the 90s and 2000s. Lady of Rage establishes herself as one of hip-hop's fiercest female MCs. Even RBX and Jewel, who have smaller profiles, benefit from the album's massive success. Death Row Records becomes the most powerful label in hip-hop. Within 3 years, they'll sign Tupac Shakur and release All Eyes on Me, which sells over 5 million copies. At its peak in the mid-1990s, Death Row is generating over 100 million annually. But as Death Row's empire grows, tensions emerge over who deserves credit for The Chronic. Chris "The Glove" Taylor, who mixed much of the album alongside Dre, later claims he was systematically denied proper credit. In a 2013 interview, The Glove explains, "When I mixed N.W.A at Sony Studios, it was 128 tracks, 2 48-track machines plus 2 24 2-inch machines all running at the same time. The credits say mixed by Chris Taylor, but I admit that he mixed more of that album than I did. He sat in front of those boards." More controversially, The Glove claims he produced Stranded on Death Row without credit, mixed most of Snoop's Doggy Style without proper acknowledgement, and even played keyboards on Tupac's California Love, again without credit. "I produced a song called Stranded on Death Row. That was me and Dre, although I never got credit for producing Stranded on Death Row, and that's where the fuck-up started," The Glove says. "I should have gotten 6 or 7 mixed by credits on that album too." The Glove confronted Dre about the missing credits. "I was really upset with what happened on the Snoop album. I didn't even get my name in the thank you section. My name was erased on that album." Colin Wolfe received co-production credit on the album, but in later interviews suggests his contributions were even more extensive than acknowledged. "For the most part, it was me and Dre who would build the tracks," Wolfe tells Wax Poetics. The question of who deserves credit for The Chronic remains contentious. Did Dre orchestrate these contributions into a cohesive vision that only he could have created? Or did he minimize the roles of essential collaborators? Both things can be true. What's undeniable is that Dr. Dre, as executive producer and creative director, shaped every aspect of the album's sound and vision, but he also had help, more help than the liner notes fully acknowledge. In 2019, the Library of Congress adds The Chronic to the National Recording Registry, recognizing it as culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. The selection notes that the album transformed popular music and created a seismic shift in the hip-hop landscape. Filmmaker Matthew McDaniel, whose riot footage appears on the album, reflects on its legacy. It's a document. It's an audio document with a lot of creativity and art and entertainment going along with it. Some people might think that that's wrong, but it's art. It's poetry. And it's supposed to have pain in it. You can gather that from listening to The Chronic, about the LA riots. You can feel it. You can kind of understand. Dr. Dre himself, in a 1997 interview, explained his philosophy. The music talks about crime, violence, and drugs because it exists. For me, it's nothing political to it. Some people involve it in politics or what have you, but for me, I love doing it. And it also makes money. It's gonna better my life and my family's life. The album's influence on subsequent artists is immeasurable. The G-Funk sound dominates hip-hop throughout the mid-90s. Every producer tries to replicate that Parliament sampling, synthesizer-heavy approach. More importantly, The Chronic proves that hardcore rap can achieve massive mainstream success without compromise. It opens doors for Tupac, Biggie, Jay-Z, Nas, and every other rapper who follows. Kanye West later compares Dre's production on The Chronic to Stevie Wonder's work on Songs in the Key of Life, among the highest praise possible. But Death Row's success comes at a cost. Suge Knight runs the label through intimidation and violence. Stories circulate about artists being held over balconies, beaten in meetings, threatened with pit bulls and guns. The 2015 film Straight Outta Compton recreates one infamous incident. Knight and associates allegedly held a man in his underwear while a pit bull was unleashed and guns fired in the air. Dre confirmed to The Hollywood Reporter, "It really happened." Dre grows increasingly uncomfortable with Knight's methods. By 1996, he's tired of the violence. Tired of the chaos. In March 1996, Dr. Dre leaves Death Row Records, walking away from an estimated $50 million in ownership stakes. He starts a new label, Aftermath Entertainment, under Interscope. Suge Knight is furious. The bad blood between them lasts for decades. In 2015, during the filming of Straight Outta Compton, Knight drives his pickup truck over two men at a filming location, killing one. He's convicted of voluntary manslaughter and sentenced to 28 years in prison. Death Row Records files for bankruptcy in 2006. The label is auctioned for $18 million in 2009. In 2022, Snoop Dogg purchases Death Row, bringing it full circle. 32 years later, The Chronic remains Dr. Dre's greatest artistic statement. He went on to produce Snoop's Doggy Style, mentor Eminem and 50 Cent, release his own follow-up 2001, and co-found Beats Electronics, sold to Apple for $3 billion in 2014. But nothing matches the cultural moment of The Chronic. It was an album created by a broke, desperate producer who just escaped exploitation. An album recorded while Los Angeles burned with righteous anger. An album that channeled rage into something smooth enough for suburban car stereos. It launched a dozen careers, established West Coast dominance, defined a sound, made violence melodic and struggle sound luxurious. It was the sound of a city processing trauma through art. The sound of Parliament-Funkadelic reimagined for the crack era. The sound of empire being built in real time. Rolling Stone ranks it number 37 on its list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. In January 2023, Dr. Dre regains full control of the album's masters through a deal with Universal Music Group 30 years after its release. The Chronic sold 5 million copies, won a Grammy, changed hip-hop forever, and captured a moment when Los Angeles, angry, grieving, defiant, found its voice through a producer who transformed pain into platinum. This has been The Sound Vault. Every album has a story, and some stories like The Chronic become the sound of a generation.